Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1088 of the Juicebox Podcast. My guest today has had type 1 diabetes for over 35 years, and she wishes to remain anonymous. This is her story. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to wear the same insulin pump that Arden does, all you have to do is go to omnipod.com/juicebox. That's it. Head over now and get started today, and you'll be wearing the same tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing since she was 4 years old. Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors.
I have had type 1 diabetes for 35 years, actually a little over 35 years. I was diagnosed on August 24th, 1987. How do I know the exact date, you might wonder? I was diagnosed on my birthday.
Hey, wow, that's terrific. How old were you that day?
I was 5.
Oh my God, that's terrible. All right. 5 years old in 87, and you've had diabetes for how long?
A little over 35 years.
Wow. So you're 40?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. You were diagnosed on your 5th birthday. You said you had fragments of memories. Tell me what you remember.
I remember being in the hospital, and I remember being scared. And I remember being calmed down by other kids who were racing in the hallway on wheelchairs. Mm-hmm. And there happened to be an extra wheelchair, so I was able to join in their racing. I remember sharing a room with a screaming baby, and that being very additionally stressful. I remember my dad crying a lot, and my mom was away lecturing in another country, and so she wasn't there for the first few days. But I remember her coming, so I must have been in the hospital for a few days in order for her to have a memory of her being there.
Yeah. Did you have brothers and sisters at that point, or do you now?
No, I am an only child.
Okay.
My father is a type 1.
Oh.
And my parents did get pregnant before me. And my mom had a miscarriage, and it somehow, I don't really know how, being that it was my father's side, but it was somehow related to my father being a type 1, that the miscarriage, I guess it just got blamed on him being a type 1.
That's interesting.
My parents tried to adopt. I don't know what year this was. I just know it was years before I was born. Mm-hmm. Because my mother was a full-time working woman who traveled a lot, and because my father is a type 1, they were denied adoption, and I was their miracle baby, I guess.
Well, still are. In 87, you get denied an adoption for the husband being type 1? That's interesting.
I was born in 82, so this was probably in the 70s.
I see. Okay. Have you ever spoken to your father about him being upset that day?
Oh, yeah. My dad is actually a large part of my story, I guess. My father was diagnosed in 1969. He probably had type 1 for many years without knowing it. He grew up very poor in New York City, and he didn't get diagnosed until he got drafted for Vietnam.
Hmm.
He apparently, a lot of draft dodgers were adding sugar to their urine. So he had to get tested multiple times in front of a panel, making sure that he wasn't doing that.
Oh.
And that's how he got diagnosed. They were like, okay, so this is legit, and we're sorry to inform you.
Yeah. At least you don't have to go to Vietnam, but you got diabetes. And what do you mean you think he had it for a while? Do you think he was LADA?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have it too long. It'll kill you if you don't diagnose it. So, like, he's got to have some help from his pancreas along the way. But was there stories that would indicate that he looked back and saw bits and pieces of it at times, or no?
I think a lot of it was a blur for him. He remembers being very thirsty, and his favorite thing to drink was Coca-Cola. So clearly that would have made things worse. I imagine maybe he had a long honeymoon phase.
Yeah, that's crazy. And are you and he similar in personality?
My father passed away in 2015. 2015. We do have had a lot in common. When I think I became an independent diabetic at a very young age because of him, which I think is both a good and a bad thing. As I grew up, I think that a lot of things that were normal for him were outdated for me. And perhaps my care would have been a lot better if I wasn't given like information that he was given, like, you know, you want to keep your blood sugars under 220 if you can, was kind of like the norm throughout my life.
Oh, okay.
With him.
How old was he when he passed?
Early 60s.
Was it complications from type 1?
Yes. He started having very, very severe hypoglycemic episodes. He became severely hypounaware. He would have seizures in the middle of the night quite frequently. And we discovered that some of those seizures involved mini strokes. So he developed dementia, and the last, I want to say 5 years of his life, he spent in assisted living.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Yeah, that's terrible. How long did it take you to figure out that you shouldn't be managing your diabetes like it was 1969?
Diabetes summer camp probably was when those ideas were first introduced to me. My parents actually sent me to a diabetes summer camp, I believe is in New Jersey, shortly after my diagnosis, but I don't remember much of it. I remember hating it. I think that I was too young for it. And we didn't try again until I was a teenager. And then it was, whoa, this is the best thing ever, you know, like meeting other people like me.
How old do you think you were when you went back the second time?
I want to say 13.
Okay. And that was good for you to see other people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What happens? Do you see people using technology that you don't have, or dealing with things differently, and then it kind of dawns on you that there might be more than one way to do this?
I think normalizing it in general, like I've always felt this sense of rejection and shame. And I always, for as long as I can remember, tried to hide the fact that I was a type 1. And being in an environment where basically everybody is doing the same things that you are, you know, I felt more out about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Hey, the shame makes sense, but rejection, how? It's
hard to describe. I always hid my diabetes, like for as long as I can remember. I didn't, if I couldn't test my blood sugar privately, I just wouldn't do it at all. This feeling of judgment, like my machine was judging me. You know, when I was first diagnosed, we didn't have glucometers, actually. I mean, sure, they came about eventually, but you know, ketone strips?
Yeah, that's how you used to test your blood sugar, by peeing on something, right?
Well, ketone strips like to test ketones, but we actually had something similar, but it was blood glucose strips, but you would like match the color from the blood strip to the side of the bottle.
Okay.
And my dad and I, we thought we were so creative, or he did, would cut the strips in half so we could save money and we both use the same strip and use less blood because these test strips required a drop of blood like the size of a pencil eraser, you know?
Okay.
And then we got our first glucometer, which actually used the same strips. I want to say it was an AccuCheck. And it was the same method, except instead of comparing the color to the side of the bottle, you put the strip in the machine. So we couldn't cut them in half anymore. Anyway, that was kind of a side story. I think once seeing actual numbers was when I started to develop that feeling of rejection and judgment.
I see. You know, you're not the first person to tell me they cut the strips in half.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not I know you're probably like, this is crazy, but I'm like, no, I've heard that before.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you see a number and it feels like a grade, I'm guessing, and then you feel like you're failing.
Yeah, and then my parents started a star chart. I wasn't very good at getting stars. So I don't think that was very beneficial for me.
Yeah, you got to make some of the stars easy to get if you're going to do that as a parent. There's a pro tip for you. Make sure they get some. Don't just set up and go one day. Do you think that your personality leans in this direction if you don't have diabetes or away from it?
I think one thing that I really struggle with is determining whether or not diabetes is the cause of it.
I see.
If this is just kind of like a natural behavior for me and where like, you know, like just what my mind does, or if diabetes somehow like triggered it. And I can't place like a defining moment, but I do also have ADD and hypothyroid, and I just recently learned about women with ADD suffering from rejection sensitivity disorder. This is a very new term for me. I think I heard about it for the first time in an ADD support group online about a year ago. Just reading up on it, it's just like it kind of sparked a lot of memories, which is part of the reason why I wrote to you about being on the podcast, was that this was a whole new thing for me. Like, oh, well, maybe this memory had something to do with RSD and how I reacted to that situation, you know? Yeah.
I want to break this into chunks because I thought what you said a minute ago was really interesting. The idea that you don't, I'm changing your words, but you aren't sure if you're the person you were meant to be or if you're this person because you have diabetes. Is that right?
Yeah, you could put it that way.
Yeah. And so would I be having these reactions or feelings if I didn't have type 1?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is your thyroid well maintained?
Yeah, actually, that's been something that has been very level ever since I started Synthroid as a child. My father took Synthroid as well.
Yeah. What's your TSH?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Find out, because I think at 2 or under is most beneficial. And a lot of doctors will tell you, oh, it's 4. It's terrific. It's in range. So look at that, because there can be anxiety, mood. There's a lot of stuff that can come from a higher TSH and an unbalanced thyroid too. So that's worth looking at. How's your energy? You have good energy, or are you tired a lot? I used to hate ordering my daughter's diabetes supplies. I never had a good experience, and it was frustrating. But it hasn't been that way for a while, actually for about 3 years now, because that's how long we've been using US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is the #1 distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide. They are the #1 specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH, the #1 fastest growing tandem distributor nationwide, the #1 rated distributor in Dexcom customer satisfaction surveys. They have served over 1 million people with diabetes since 1996. and they always provide 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. Find out why US Med has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau at usmed.com/juicebox, or just call them at 888-721-1514. Get started right now, and you'll be getting your supplies the same way we do.
My energy goes up and down throughout the day. I'm not a morning person, but once I'm up and going, then I'm pretty good through the day.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my energy levels being very poor when I was younger. I think because my blood sugars were very out of control.
Yeah.
I did have a very unusual eating disorder when I was young. Again, kind of like going back on, well, was RSD like kind of affiliated to my eating disorder? Because unlike other eating disorders that I've heard about, like diabulimia and things like that, mine never really had anything to do with weight or weight loss, or intentional weight loss, I should say.
Right.
How
did it manifest? Just lemons? No, I'm just kidding. What was it?
I was a binge eater,
mm-hmm.
specific to sugar. I don't know how it started, but it goes as far back as I can remember. I think perhaps somewhat triggered by, you're not allowed to have sugar. So maybe it was a little bit of a rebellion.
Sure.
But I don't remember feeling rebellious. I could eat a whole pizza in one sitting. I would eat like a whole package of hot dogs getting home from school. If I had the opportunity to go into a store and buy bags and bags of candy, I would, and just eat them all in one sitting. I remember like one of the worst of it was filling an ice cream cone with pure cane sugar and just licking the sugar out of the ice cream cone.
Oh my gosh. That's a dedication. So
I would eat packages of waffles. And I wasn't bulimic. I never threw up. I never denied myself insulin. I always took my long acting. I always took my short acting. I never counted my carbs. I never did anything like that. I would just be like, oh, I just ate a ton of sugar, so I'm going to rage bolus.
You think this eating you think was about proving that you can? Like, did somebody tell you not to eat these things at some point? You're like, well, fuck you, I'm going to?
Possibly. I don't know, but it was binging. It was really bad binging.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was like a young teenager that I realized how severe of a problem it was, or actually even realized it was a problem at all, because I wasn't overweight from it or anything. I was a subscriber to, I think it was Teen Magazine, and there was an article about binge eating, and this girl was describing how she just couldn't stop eating when she was in, like described her binges. And I just read the whole thing and I'm like, that's me. Okay. I do that.
Okay.
And I went to school the next day. I was probably about 15 because it was high school. And I was a freshman. Yeah. And I went to the school counselor with the article in hand. And I said, hey, I think I've got a really big problem here. This is me. Like, I read this article and this is me. And the counselor literally looked me up and down and said, no, it isn't. You're not overweight. Binge eaters are fat. It just went on from there. I was like, and I took his answer as reality. I'm like, okay, he's right. I don't have a problem. And I felt embarrassed, ashamed, rejected for being wrong.
Mm.
And then I was institutionalized for it a year later.
I have to tell you that the closest I've come to crying during a recording this week is you saying that the counselor turned you away. I'm not kidding. I mean, to imagine the luck of a young person having an eating disorder, recognizing it through a magazine article, taking it to a trusted adult and like, hey, I figured out something wrong with me. I need help. And they're like, shut up. That's not you. It's really heartbreaking. I mean, genuinely, I'm so sorry. I've been wrestling with this thought for a few days now about how much in the world goes unsolved, or how many things go off the rails needlessly because people who don't know are not don't check themselves. They feel completely comfortable saying the first thing that comes to their head and not knowing, and and how that derails people constantly, or derails, entire movements. Things that people say that they want to, they think they're being inspiring, or they think that they're, knowledgeable, and they're wrong. And then something like this happens. And I don't know, it felt so personal to me that time got wasted for you, and that you got lucky enough to trip into an answer. And then, you were that close to being helped. And then would you say a year later you ended up in an institution over it?
Yeah. So I was having like PK episodes, I guess, but I didn't recognize them. I was just like, oh, I ate too much. I don't feel good. But again, like I never purged, or I later found out when I was in the hospital that my form of purging was elevated blood sugars, but it wasn't intentional. But that's why I wasn't gaining weight from all that food I was eating.
Yeah, sure. And that's what I was waiting for you to say that. But right, your blood sugar was so high, your body couldn't even hold on to fat. So
there was I was seeing a therapist, and I don't even know where my parents were through all this, really. I mean, my mom did travel a lot for work. Maybe I guess I was just really good at hiding it. And my parents really put a lot of independence on me, so there wasn't a lot of checks and balances there. So I certainly don't put any blame on my parents, to be clear. But I went to a therapist appointment, and I started throwing up bile in the middle of the appointment. And the therapist was like, okay, there's something wrong, and I feel like this is a cry for help, and we're taking you to a hospital right now. And it wasn't like an ER, it was like an inpatient, like mental institution. And they brought me to the eating disorder unit, and I was there for 2 days. And apparently, because I had an overeating disorder without purging, which is something that they really had no experience with, it was having a negative effect on the other patients in the unit. So they moved me to the juvenile mental unit, I suppose they call it. It was like Girl Interrupted, no joke. Probably the most horrible experience of my life being there. And my eating disorder wasn't really addressed. It was more ignored. All of the other kids on the unit went on field trips to the candy machines and the soda machines, and I was not allowed to go. I was the only one left behind. And then I did something that was probably, like, to this day, I regret more than anything I've ever done. I gave a girl Lancets in exchange for her bringing me back food from the candy machines, because she was a cutter.
Oh, wow. That's some black market trading right there.
Yeah, that's how bad it was.
Do you remember having the thought, like, I'm going to let this girl cut herself so I can get food? Oh, no.
I reported, like, right after she gave me the food, I reported her for having sharps.
Like, Caroline's like, look, I got to get these M&Ms somehow, and then I'm gonna save you. Don't worry, I'll save you right after. My gosh, that's intense. Like, really, like, that's an intense decision. How old were you then?
I think 16.
Wow. Well, that's something else. How long did you end up being there in total?
It's so erased from my mind that I'm really not sure. I could say like 3-4 weeks, and it could have been a week, but felt like that.
Right.
But I think maybe 6 weeks, because I do remember halfway through being allowed to go home for a day, and then coming back.
Your parent.
But it was a really weird experience, because, like, some of the people in the unit were hard to handle. I mean, like, like strapped to beds once in a while. Like there was actually one moment, or one night I remember that we're a bunch of teenagers. It was co-ed. It kind of felt like summer camp when you were having a good day, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
My roommate and I, like, we snuck out to like hang out with a couple boys, and we got caught. She got strapped to her bed and rolled away. I don't know what happened to the guys. And I was thrown in a room, stripped of my clothes, completely naked, like locked in this room with nothing, like not even a mattress. It was just a cold floor.
Hmm.
And I just like thinking about it right now, I'm like shaking. Like I can't believe that is something that happened to me. Like I am a normal person, and that is a story that is in my past. Like, how is that possible?
Right. I had an eating disorder and you end up in that situation.
Yeah.
Ugh. Jeez. What is that? 80, 97. Hold on. Is that in the early 2000s?
I want to say late 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, it must have been like 97, 96, 97.
Okay. Jeez. The hell. Don't you? Sometimes you hear people's stories. You're like, I expected more from the world. Like, like I guess not, but Jesus. Well, that'll keep you from getting involved with any kind of like system again. I imagine you'll avoid that like the plague. Were your parents in contact with you during those 6 weeks? In 2015, I needed support to start making this podcast, and Omnipod was there. They bought my first ad. In a year when the entire podcast got as many downloads as it probably got today, Omnipod was there to support the show, and they have been every year for 9 seasons. I want to thank them very much, and I want to ask you to check them out at omnipod.com/juicebox.
There was like family therapy sessions. I don't really remember much. I remember my dad, I mean, like he definitely felt self-loathing. I mean, even before any of this happened, this is my fault. This is happening to you. This is my fault that you have this condition,
Oh.
And, I think at the time there wasn't really a genetic link, but I mean, both my parents were doctors. So if anybody knew, it would be my dad, but he was still convinced. He was like, no, this is my fault.
It's such a strange thing, isn't it, to think that because if your dad had blue eyes and you had blue eyes, he wouldn't be like, well, that's my fault. My doing. He didn't give you blue eyes, but it is weird how people think about stuff like that. But I understand it. And I mean, it's been obvious since the beginning of your story. If he's crying in the hospital, in my mind, he's going over, oh, I have diabetes. I did this, like that's, I'm assuming his pathway of thought, which is, I mean, it has to be really difficult to deal with. I would imagine, from his perspective. And then it's probably hard to see things even more so going wrong for you, because then you think, oh, again, here we are, the thing I gave her, and this is her struggle. Do you feel a moment where like this sort of drama like is gone from your life, or does it stick with you constantly? Are you able to move past some of these things? How does all that work?
The whole hospitalization part of my life is kind of like almost not a memory anymore. I really just kind of started thinking about it again because I thought it was relevant to my story to speak with you today.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, it has had an effect on me, but I'm almost in denial that it ever happened. Like it just seems so unreal.
I see. Something you just don't think about anymore. It just is part of the past.
And I remember like how they managed my diabetes too when I was in the hospital. It just seemed so archaic as well, like I had gone back in a time machine again, and they would prick my finger with this javelin and wipe it again with alcohol afterwards. And I thought that was so strange, and they wouldn't actually push it for more blood until the alcohol itself was dry. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, the wound would close up again. So.
Jeez.
It was just kind of so weird.
How did you learn about the rejection sensitivity dysphoria? That's just in the last year for you.
I learned about it in a Facebook support group for women with ADD.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, were saying, "Oh, is this, am I being unreasonable with this situation, or is my RSD acting up again?" And I commented on a couple of those posts saying, "What is this RSD that everybody keeps talking about?" And they, told me what the acronym was for, and I started doing some research on it, and I was like, that definitely sounds like something that I'm afflicted with. I talked to my PCP about it, and she'd never heard of it, so apparently it doesn't exist. But I think that it is something that's so new that it is still questionable whether or not it is a diagnosable thing.
Right.
I believe it's still up in the air.
But if you're having the feeling, I mean, does it match the description I'm seeing online? Extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by the perception that a person has been rejected or criticized?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like disabling.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there are things that I will not do because of that fear of what somebody will think of me.
Do they have to say it, or can you just infer from them that they're unhappy or dissatisfied and it'll hit you then?
Sometimes something that hits me hard is when somebody does say it. And that's okay, that was hurtful. But because somebody actually did say it, in my mind, everybody is thinking it.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then
I had a good friend say to me once, what was her words? If you had more respect for your diabetes, other people would have more respect for you. And it hurt.
I wonder what that even means.
It hurt so bad because I didn't know what it meant. And I'm pick apart all the possibilities of what it could mean. And I wrote a really nice paragraph, because this was through Messenger, about, I don't really know what you meant by this. I just want you to, could you please, elaborate a little bit more on what you meant by that?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "You know exactly what I mean. I don't need to explain myself to you. This is not a conversation I want to have."
Did she start? We're
just not friends. We're just not friends anymore.
I was gonna say, what stops you from going, "Oh, this asshole," and then I'm done with it? To break it down, you sound like you manage your disease well. Like, it's not like you're not being respectful of it. Like, this is her projecting something she's thinking onto you, but then you're absorbing it instead of just going, "That's not right," because you didn't think it was right, because you responded to her and said, "Hey, I don't think I'm doing that. What are you talking about?" And I don't know why. What stops you? I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this and don't have an answer, but what stops you from not just disregarding her?
Word others. I think that was the most hurtful part of that statement, was others would respect you, because she wasn't just speaking for herself when she added that word.
Oh, there's a cabal of people who don't respect you somewhere.
Yeah, we have a lot of mutual friends, and now I just have this in my head. Everybody is thinking this about me. Everybody, whatever it is that she's thinking about me, they're all thinking that about me now.
Oh, I see. Do you really believe that's true?
A little bit. She and quite a few of our mutual friends were there for me when I started having my severe retinopathy issues.
Mm-hmm.
But they never really gave me the opportunity to explain how it happened. And how it happened, Scott, was not, I mean, I can say that it was probably a repercussion from my days overeating. How it actually happened was when I started on Dexcom. I started on the G4 when it first came out. A friend of mine from Diabetes Summer Camp that I'm friends with on Facebook had gotten it. And she knew quite a bit about my history, and she was telling me about it on Facebook. And she said, "Yeah, you really want to look into this Dexcom. It's life-changing. You can see what your blood sugar is every 5 minutes." And, at this time I was still struggling to test myself. And it wasn't just about seeing the number on the meter and the meter judging me. Just a myriad of reasons that I just wasn't testing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was totally open to this idea of having a discrete little box in my purse that I could pull out once in a while and be like, oh wow, check that out.
Yeah.
So I'm not making a show of it, and the information is just mine. And so I got it, and I brought interesting story was I brought the receiver to the hospital, my next CDE appointment. And I handed it to her, and she's like, I've never seen one of these before. I don't think I have the cords or the software to download the information. And I was like, really? Apparently I was the first one at my hospital to get one because I went out on my own to do it.
Yeah.
And they're a Medtronic sponsored hospital. Not anymore. They've got tons of patients on Dexcom now.
Yeah, I bet.
But knowing those numbers and having the frequency of seeing like what food is doing to me, I started injecting more. I started correcting more. And my A1C was dropping so fast. Before I started Dexcom, I was a little over a 10. I was down to a 7.5 in less than 3 months. I was walking down the street one day and just, it looked like looking through a red lava lamp.
Mm-hmm.
There's streams of blood in my vision, and I don't know what's happening. And the general consensus about everything that I went through and the people that helped me behind my back, if she had taken better care of herself, this is her fault. And the very few people that I've shared with that, I said, actually, this happened to me because I dropped my A1C too fast. This happened to me because I got in tighter control and got better too quickly.
Yeah, nobody told you that you should have done it slower. That's really...
Yeah, and I don't know that it was even really known back then.
No, I don't
because
imagine.
My endocrinologist was so proud, my CDE was so proud. And then I go see a retinal surgeon, and he just, I've been seeing so much of this with this new technology.
Hmm. Were they able to fix it? I mean, you got some bleeders, obviously, but is that under control now?
I had a vitrectomy in each eye, and it's been stable for 6 years.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, it's funny that as you're telling your story, the people who, if there are people out there judging you, those who would do that, obviously, first of all, they don't have anywhere near all the information. They don't understand the history of it, or, what it was like to manage in the 60s, which would have informed your father, who would have informed you. Sounds like your mom traveled a lot. Your dad was around. You're young. You alluded to something earlier. You never got back to it, but you said that you were given your kind of autonomy early, and it was good and bad. And what I took from that was the good part was you knew how to do the things, but the bad part was you were a little kid in charge of a really difficult disease. And and how are you really going to see big picture stuff and make decisions and adjustments? There's no way for a kid to do that. And those people,
and I think my parents wanted to give me that independence. I just went in the wrong direction.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you feeling that way, but like from an outsider's perspective, like, I don't know what else would you expect to happen to, for a little kid to be like, I mean, name another thing you'd put a little kid in charge of. You know what I mean? Would you be in charge of like paying the electric bill? Probably not. Like you have to, I don't know, pressure wash the house every spring. I'm not putting an 8-year-old in charge of that. But diabetes, yeah, sure, they could do that. It's a very, I mean, we talk about it now because we know better and we see, data, but children with diabetes benefit from their parents' involvement into their early to mid 20s. And that's not something that you got, and it's not like, it's like you said, it's not like somebody's fault. It's not like your parents were like malicious. They were doing the 70s thing. Like, this is her thing and she'll need to know how to do it. So let's get her out in front of it now and teach her what to do, except there was so much more to do that nobody knew about.
And I think also that there was a much higher fear of hypoglycemia than hyperglycemia.
Yeah.
For both my dad's generation and a little bit in mine too. especially when my dad started being like hypo unaware. He sometimes got violent.
Yeah. Right. And then, so you're trying to avoid that. You're trying to avoid passing out. You're trying to avoid having a seizure. And maybe that was the right thing to do at the time. It's the carryover that's always the problem. Like when we leave one generation of care and go into another one, it's the carryover that hurts. Like I get that your dad's fears were what they were based on the technology and the insulin, but then there's something better available and you're still playing by the old rules. That's where the sense of loss comes from. Like there's because you existed in a time where you were doing a thing and there was a better thing. And that's where that terrible feeling comes from. Like your dad's fate was of the time he was born. No different than if I don't know, people used to have babies and like, they'd have 10 babies to get 3 of them to live. Nobody felt bad about that at the time because that's how it worked. So you're like, oh, it's sad, but this is how it works. And, people get diabetes in the 60s and they don't live very long. And that's sad, but this is how it works. It's when I hear the stories of the carryover people, like women who were told, there's a woman on here once, I think she was diagnosed in college and her doctor told her to quit college and go home and enjoy her life because she'd never have a job long enough for it to matter and a man wouldn't want her. Like that happened not that long ago. It's crazy. I
actually had a doctor say something similar to me, but it was after my retinopathy and my vision was still very, very bad. I was and I am single. I live alone, and she told me that I should quit my job so I could get on disability so I wouldn't have to worry about being able to afford my Dexcom, my insulin pump, and my insulin.
I spoke to a woman yesterday who got divorced to get healthcare, and you know what it led to? An actual divorce. Like they were a happy family who split up so that they could qualify for healthcare, and then they actually split up later.
Yep. I actually I did go on disability. I followed her advice, and I was on disability for 2 years. Then I found a job that was able to accommodate me, and I do have vision loss. And then it turned out I was making too much money, and now I'm being sued by Social Security for like $15,000.
Oh, fun!
Yeah.
you must have had some whack ass A1Cs when you were little, huh? With the eating disorder and the DKA that you didn't know was happening. You must have been in the 13s, like up there.
I wouldn't be surprised. I do think that there was a little bit of enabling when I first went to diabetes.
Broke up. Hold on a second. Sorry.
My CIT year.
Hey, I'm sorry. You broke up.
We were comparing A1Cs, and I was...
I'm sorry. You broke up. A little bit of enabling. Can you do that part again?
A little bit of enabling at diabetes summer camp, talking to, comparing A1C between 11 and 14 and thinking, well, mine's only in the high 10s. So if they're fine and they're higher than me, I'm fine.
I'm killing it. Yeah. Look at me. Beating them by a whole point. Yeah. It's funny. I've heard old timey diabetes camp stories, and I've heard as many that are like, I found people there and I learned how to do things, as I've heard stories of like, oh, that's where I learned to be diabulemic because people told me how to cut my insulin to lose weight there, and that's where I learned how to do this. I'm like, oh geez. So I mean, there's going to be an element of humanity everywhere, and sometimes it's as dumb luck as who you bump into. Like imagine had you gone to a counselor who didn't think, oh, eating disorder has to mean overweight. You would have been better off in that situation. Yeah, hopefully, but I don't know. Oh my gosh. It really is crazy. Do you think there's a way to, have you left it all behind you, or does it still color your existence today? Everything that happened.
I think it does color my existence in a different way. I've never actually let go of binging. For a while, it was replaced with alcohol. the calories from the food I used to binge, but with less of an effect on my blood sugar. So I did go through. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible, but it became a problem. Actually, kind of a side story to that was when I recognized that I had an alcohol problem. It was when I would get withdrawal symptoms from not drinking. So I went to the hospital and, decided I needed what do you call it? Like a medically guided detox.
Okay.
And I went to the ER for it and waited in the waiting room for probably over 12 hours. And I was shaking when they finally took me in and said, "We don't do detox from alcohol here. There's nothing we can do for you." So, they gave me some fluids, and I overdosed on insulin on purpose to make them take me in. And so I was admitted, and I told and they did the detox there. And I was there for about a week. My endocrinologist came to visit me. My CDE came to visit me. My PCP came to visit me. I told them all what I did. I said, I took a shot of fast acting insulin to get admitted. And they said, "Good for you. You needed that." So I feel like, again, like this is kind of a reoccurring thing in my life.
Yeah.
I recognize I have a problem. I go get help and I get turned away.
Yeah. Binging is like, I think binging is like an indication of depression or anxiety. And it shouldn't matter what you're binging, honestly. Like it just, that part doesn't make sense. Like, why does it matter, like, what it is? And how come they could take you if you were dying, but not take you because of an alcohol thing? And geez.
And I've been able to manage the binge drinking ever since. All I needed was that detox, and then I've been fine.
Is it alcoholism, or is it just wanting to take something in great quantity?
The second, I believe.
It's interesting. Have you spoken to a therapist about that ever?
I've had a really hard time finding a therapist, and I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to do like an online therapy. But there is very little available. I tried a couple of them. The last one I tried, one was probably 2 years ago, and she said, "Oh, your father passed of type 1 diabetes. You have type 1 diabetes. It must be so hard for you to know that you're going to die young of the same thing your dad died of." And I was like, okay, I'm not coming back here.
More people who don't understand. What backwards part of the country do you live in? Oh my gosh. It's interesting about mental health and therapy is I was approached by an online therapy company about doing advertisements for them. And I thought, well, that might be helpful for people. Let me kind of just get an idea. I went into my Facebook group, so many people in there. I'm like, would you guys want me to do this? It would come with, like you'd save 10% when you signed up and stuff like that. And like, would that be something you were interested in? The amount of people who are like, "Oh my God, please do that. That would be terrific. I'm going to do that." Like overwhelming response, like Caroline, an overwhelming response. So I'm like, all right, I'll do this. So I go back to the company. I'll say, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." Like they set me up with a link, and I put it out there, and 2 people have signed up. And I think it really has taught me the difference between saying, "Yeah, I probably should go to therapy," and actually being able to do it. Like make yourself like do it. It's an expanse between those two situations, because I can't tell you how many hundreds of people were like, "Please do that. As soon as you put this link here, I will be clicking on it." And then nobody touched it. So it's not an easy thing to get involved in. Like I understand why it's a leap. And then if you make the leap and you get there and somebody so wholly doesn't understand the thing you're talking about, well, geez, like, what are you supposed to do? Your dad died of it, so you're going to die of it. Great. Thanks. And then what do? You find yourself in the position of educating the therapist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And paying for it.
paying to catch them up. Great. Let me do a trailer about diabetes for you. You charge me $40 while we're doing it. Terrific. And therapy is not covered by a lot of people's insurance. It's a lot of out-of-pocket cost. So yeah, you want to have a decent experience when you start. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, what's the answer? Like, I mean, you're 40 years old, so you've been through all of this. Like, what's your wisdom on it?
I think that I'm kind of being my own therapist in a way, doing research on, the rejection sensitive dysphoria. And something I read in an article about RSD is like, sure, there's no treatment for it, but it can be, you can overcome it by defining why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I don't just, I'm not just having a panic attack out of nowhere right now. Take a breath and realize why you're having it, what's triggering it. And that's been helpful for me.
Just kind of giving
another thing that's
naming
been
things,
helpful.
giving them a voice.
Yeah. It's also been a little helpful for me to, since having my Dexcom and Omnipod and having a history of constantly hiding it and not letting anybody know, being more expressive about it. Like I try to put my placement now in spots where people will see it and ask me about it. And that's been mentally life-changing for me.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm a proponent of loud and proud on diabetes. Like, just, and if you have to start small with it just peeking out of your arm, your sleeve or something like that, then right on. But it's too big of a part of your life. It's too important to your health to hide, because the hiding lends you to say things like, well, I'm not going to test right now because somebody's going to see, or I'm not going to help myself right now because I don't want people to know, or like, that's just dangerous physically and psychologically. I think I understand if you don't want for people to know, but I just think long-term, it's a benefit if you're open about it. Also, the openness is never hardly what you think. I mean, like, it sucks that you met people who were like, gave you crap, who you thought were friends, but is it not better not to have those people as friends? Like, at least right? That they're shitheads. I mean, have you met other people who don't care that you have diabetes and don't have big opinions about things they don't understand?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, everything's just such a process, that's the part that.
Gosh, I can't believe it's about 20 years ago now. I've met a lot of type 1s in my town.
Have you? That's excellent.
Yeah. And I was surprised.
There you are. I see you people. No, I think it's terrific. I mean, I think Arden's only friend with type 1 is somebody she's very close with, who's a friend she met online, but they've never actually met in person. But they talk, and they're very close. They're both in college now, and I think it's been beneficial for both of them to know each other. It just really has been. I think they met because I think the girl tried to follow me on Instagram and followed Arden by mistake, and that's how they ended up meeting each other. So it can't be said enough that you need to be able to see yourself in the world around you. It's important, My first friend in this town, that was a type 1, had the same eye surgeon as I did. And so she went through it all before I did and was very supportive of that. And I was having a follow-up eye exam, and she was on Facebook, and she had just had a double organ transplant. She had a kidney pancreas transplant. And I saw that she was active on Facebook, and I said, hey, you want to visit her? Because I'm in the hospital for an eye exam. And she's like, yeah, sure. So I went up to her floor, and the nurse said, yeah, she just had a double transplant yesterday. She's exhausted. She can't have any visitors. And I was like, well, I have it on good authority that she's sitting up in bed on her phone on Facebook right now. Are you sure? Also, I need friends, so let's go.
So the nurse checked in on her and let me in, and she was awake and talking to me, and it was so important to me to see her because I had such a huge question. And my question to her was, do you feel low? Because I'm thinking, wow, yesterday you were a type 1 diabetic and today you're not, you know?
Oh, and does 85 blood sugar feel low to you all day
Yeah.
long? But it doesn't.
And and you have a pancreas that's doing it for you. Like I don't know, in my mind, I thought, I bet she feels low.
She's got to be dizzy, this girl. But no, right? Like it's the action, it's the action of the insulin that gives you that feeling. Like the fall. Like you ever hear people say I can feel the fall. And
yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah. It's because that the insulin's moving your blood sugar in a way that, is not natural, completely natural to you. So it's something you can feel. That's really interesting. You still friends?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
He doesn't have the pancreas anymore, and she did have to get another kidney, but otherwise she's doing great.
That's cool. Yeah, sometimes the organs don't make it. I interviewed somebody recently who had to go through a couple before the one they have now that seems to be, holding on. So really weird world. How long did she not have diabetes for?
I think it was almost a year.
Wow. Oh my gosh. It seems like I can't tell if that's bad or not. Like, you know what I mean? Like if getting the year off is terrific and just, I'll take it. Or if it's such a letdown when you see your blood sugar start creeping up again, you're like, oh, geez.
I've heard the pancreas is such a hard one to keep though.
Yeah. It can be for sure. I mean, organs in general. Like I said, I was interviewing a guy who's had a number of transplants and he got like 8 years out of one and he was thrilled about it.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should have? Something I didn't bring up or something you meant to say that hasn't gotten said?
I'm not sure. I think I wanted to talk about my mom a little bit, but
we can. Don't worry. That's why I wanted to bring it up. So let me ask you before we start, are you less nervous than you were an hour ago?
Yeah.
There's a moment when you started cruising and I was like, oh, she's okay now. And
I think that at some points, like my ADD kicks in and I kind of go off topic and then I'm like, where was I again? Okay. But then
I haven't noticed you go off topic once.
Oh, really? I felt like I did a lot.
No, I thought you were very clear and linear. And I didn't, I mean, if you listen to the podcast, like I didn't do the Pulp Fiction thing to you too much. I didn't go back in time and then come back up here to present and go back again, which I like doing. I didn't do that as much with you, but I still thought you were, I never felt like, oh, what is she talking about? Like I never had that feeling one time. So maybe you're being hard on yourself.
I often am.
Yeah, I didn't have a thought like that at all. All right. So what about your mom?
When I was 9, we moved and I had my first seizure that I remember in the middle of the night. We had just gotten a puppy. My puppy woke my parents up and I had walked, I guess, into the hallway right outside my parents.
Outside your parents. Sorry. Hey, I'm sorry. I lost you outside your parents, outside your parents' room.
Yep.
Yeah.
And my mom called 911. And can you guess what happened?
The dog complained that the little girl they got her is broken.
No, my mom called 911 and got the DDD. This number does not exist in your area.
Really?
Yeah. So this was in 1991. What? And 911 was not something that existed everywhere. And I know that's hard to believe, right?
Yeah.
So my mom got an operator who got her to emergency dispatch. And I came to, surrounded by firemen in full gear because they didn't know what they were responding to. They were all volunteers. I guess they gave me some dextrose, brought me to the hospital. But my mom was so impressed by what happened, she joined the fire department.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Also,
and my mom...
I was just going to say, this is not off topic, but you're reminding me that we all used to have stickers on our telephones with the phone numbers for the police, the fire, and the ambulance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was no 911. They're these little square, like 2-inch stickers square, and they had the 3 numbers on them. You stuck them to your phone. So you had you reminded me of something I'd forgotten about. How about that? Yeah. And then your mom just like, was your, I was going to say, was your mom looking to hook up with a fireman, but she was married. So that's inappropriate. But what happened? So she became a volunteer fireman?
She became a paramedic. Yeah.
Good for her.
She was about to retire. She was a doctor, and she's a forensic pathologist, I should say. And she joined the volunteer fire department. And I went to college in 2001. And in September of 2001, my mom was missing in New York City.
Wait, how?
She wasn't a New York City department, but she was in New York City. She just jumped into action on 9/11.
Oh my gosh. So she was in the area?
Yeah. And the fire department she belonged to did go there. I mean, but they were in the center of it when it happened. They went to help in the aftermath. But my mom happened to be there on 9/11. She just kind of jumped into action. And my dad and I didn't hear from her for about a week. She's fine now.
Oh, a week? Was she like hurt, or was she just working?
She was just working, but also all the phones were down.
Yeah, no, I remember.
So she was trying to get in touch with my dad and I. My dad was stuck on, I want to say, the Washington Bridge for hours. So I didn't hear from him for a while. My dad was a professor at the College of Mount St. Vincent. Mm-hmm. So he was stuck getting out of the city. So, both my parents are kind of MIA for about 24 hours. And then it was just my mom that was missing. And it was September. Didn't really have many friends yet, being a freshman in college.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're just by yourself at school while this is all happening. It's very frightening. For people who didn't live through it as an adult, like we lived in central New Jersey when it happened. My wife was working in Manhattan for years before that, but had just very recently moved to Jersey City. Her building got moved to Jersey City. And people's cell phones, like we didn't used to leave our cell phones on all the time. I don't know if that's something people know or not, because the batteries would die. Yeah. So you'd turn them on to make a call. And, now plugging your phone in and charging it is a part of everyday life. But back then, you wouldn't do that all the time. So my wife is calling me, to say they're evacuating my building, and we're being pushed on foot into like past the highway. They're just making them walk west, basically, away from the city. And later she found out it's because they used her building as a morgue. And
wow.
They were ferrying bodies to her building, which was right on the water. And then just doctors who happened to work in the buildings around were triaging people and stacking bodies up. But the people they pushed out of the building, they just basically pointed and they were like, walk. And the cops just pushed you. They just kept pushing them away. So my wife and a girl she worked with made their way to the girl's car that was parked in a lot somewhere. And they just finally made their way out and got on the Jersey Turnpike and headed south because she was trying to get my wife home. So I had to call a family member because Cole was a baby. And I basically I met my father-in-law on the side of the road, and I was like, here's his bottles, here's his formula. I put his car seat in my father-in-law's truck, and I was like, I'm going to go find Kelly. And then I just headed north, but we weren't in contact. So we would pick up the phone at certain intervals and kind of report where we were. And like, no lie, like we saw each other. We worked it out so we could see each other on opposite sides of the turnpike. And then I just found a place to cross over, and I crossed over and grabbed her. I think that whole process of driving what would have been a 45-minute ride, an hour ride in a normal day, and then getting her back again, I was gone for about 9 hours trying to get her out of the city. Like it was really something. And then her friend didn't get home till well after midnight after that. It's just a crazy time. And you're sitting in college and nobody can find your mom, and your dad's that's terrible.
Yeah, my dad and I spoke every night. Remember the first night that we got in touch with each other, we ended the call, and then he called me right back and he said, "You didn't say I love you." And I was like, "Dad, you know I love you." And he's like, "Yeah, but you didn't say it." And I think from, with your mom missing from now on, like we need to say it before
Mm-hmm.
we say goodbye, like every time we speak on the phone. And that became our thing.
Yeah.
And up until he died, that was always our thing. We
Oh,
never ended a conversation without saying I love you.
that's lovely. Really,
Yeah.
very, very lovely. I can tell you that the Manhattan is from my house. I don't know how many miles. I can actually figure it out, but you could walk out of the back door of my house and just smoke was just rising up in the air for days. And I'm a good hour and I don't know 15 minutes from the city by car. I'm actually looking at it right now. I'm 46 miles away, and I could step outside of my house and look up and see smoke like it was next to me. It felt like it was
Yep, I can believe that.
really insane. So, so you and your father had this nice thing, right? You said, "I love you" every time. And did you ever have the feeling that the therapist tried to give you the "I'm going to die early"?
I don't know. I've thought about it. I think maybe I thought about that even before she said it. But it was, it still wasn't her place to say. So I was still upset with her for saying it, even if I already thought it.
Yeah, it's also not accurate, but
Another thing that my father, would say a lot throughout my childhood was, "You're so lucky, Caroline. Your generation's going to see a cure. You're going to be cured." And I think that also had a little bit of a detrimental part to my self-care.
yeah,
Like, oh, I can treat my body like crap now because I will be cured in the future.
yeah.
I believed him. He was my dad. I believed him.
Yeah, that's a misstep. I understand wanting to say it, but you can't put that in someone's head because, like, I understand somebody wants to say that because of a hopeful thing, but I think the very problem you just described is the concern. What if that makes people think, well, then I don't have to take this very seriously because it won't be here forever, and
Yeah.
that's tough. No, I'm sorry.
And my parents were pretty renowned doctors, and my dad, it wasn't just like, oh, what my daddy says is always true, but he had some backup to it, I
Yeah, it
guess,
felt like he knew
which made
something.
it.
Yeah, yeah, no. If somebody's gonna know, it'd be this guy. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, are you interested in, like you said, you've been single and you live alone? Is that something is that something you're doing on purpose, or are you looking for somebody, or what are you thinking about?
No, I think that's another thing that, I've been struggling with. I think that some of my other behaviors tend to push people away. I do have tenants, so I'm not alone. I do have trouble asking for help though. So sometimes even if one of my tenants is home, I've called an ambulance.
Can I
But no, I'm not single on purpose, I guess is the.
can I ask you a question? You just said like some of your actions can push people away. Do you have examples?
It might just be in my head, trying to think of an example. I guess the only example that really comes to mind is something that happened when I was in a relationship where I was having quite a few low blood sugars, and once in a while didn't have enough with me. I wasn't prepared with enough to treat it, and my significant other had to go out of his way to get something for me, and it was a huge inconvenience.
Hmm.
And I think that had a large impact on our relationship.
Would a therapist say that you were looking for somebody to take care of you the way you didn't feel like you were taken care of as a child?
Not really. But,
No?
well, I mean, a therapist might say that, but
Yeah.
I want to say I am capable of taking care of myself.
Oh, of course you are. Yeah, no, of course you are. But is there any part of you that's just like, wouldn't it be cool if somebody else thought about this and not me? I bring it up because we just saw the kids recently, and it was Arden's spring break. So Arden went to where Cole is. We all met there, and Arden spent the first couple nights at Cole's apartment. And then we were like, look, you can, if you stay here, obviously, or come back to the hotel, like what Mom and I got, whatever you want to do. And like, you could see, like, they were having a good time. My son wanted her to stay. And she's like, Cole, I'm sorry. She's like, I'm going to go back to the hotel so Dad can take care of my diabetes tonight. Like, she's like, I just want a day off, like, from this. And, I mean, that was a very conscious statement, but I wonder if that doesn't happen subconsciously, where you're just like, oh, I wish somebody else would just remember to bring a fucking juice box so I don't have to do it. Like that kind of thing. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, in a way, getting a Dexcom and an Omnipod was that for me.
Yeah, give it to them, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think you should date. You seem lovely, and I'm sure somebody would be very lucky to be with you. So
I got set up on a date a few years ago, and my friend introduced me to her friend, and I, like, for the life of me, you're a great guy, but I don't understand why my friend thought that you and I were compatible. And then he took out his insulin pump.
Oh, you had nothing else in common but that?
And there was nothing else but that. And I was like, oh, okay.
I don't know. It's not always that hard. My wife and I, like, we don't have the same sense of humor. We don't she thinks about things differently than I do. And I mean, it still works. It's just, I don't know. Anyway, I say, give it a try. It's up to you. Of course, I'm not in charge of your life, but, again, I think somebody'd be lucky to be with you. So.
Thank you. It's just getting out there and finding a place to meet people, I guess. I'm a little skeptical of the online dating thing.
It's not that hard. You're a girl. Boys will just you just take a shower, look half clean, walk outside. One of us will be like, hey, what's up? We're very easy to impress. You don't have to try as hard as you think. Really not that hard. I think clean and looking in, like, both eyes going in the same direction would be enough. And then your loveliness will shine through and you'll find people. But yeah, I don't know. So I can't imagine, honestly, like, I don't understand dating. Like, I've dated when I was younger, when people were around. I remember my cousin telling me, as I was graduating from high school, my cousin said, wait till you see how hard it is to meet girls when you're not in school anymore. And I was like, oh, what's he talking about? But man, he's right. And so, I know it's hard. Like, it's like, how do you get around somebody enough to get a vibe for them before you try it out? You can't, right? So you just kind of jump in cold. And, it seems like you might have a little trouble with like that. Like, I mean, you were really nervous just having, like, being on this in the beginning. So, like, that initial, like, I can see where it would be hard. How about at work? Is that a bad spot?
Probably inappropriate for where I work now. But I mean, there's been some interest in previous jobs, I guess.
Well,
there was one, I mean, I guess it's not really dating related, but this place I was working, it was kind of set up with a bunch of cubicles, and this new guy started, about the same age as me, and at the time, and some coworkers came up to me and said, hey, so-and-so, like, he really needs your help. And I thought that they meant, like, training him on something, on a computer program or whatever. So I go over to him, and he is staring at his computer screen. He's not responding to anything I'm saying to him. And somebody shoves a juice bottle in my hand and says, he has the same thing as you. Fix him.
Big help. Thanks a lot.
And I was just, and he was a big guy. I mean, like, basketball player straight from college kind of size, And I was thinking about how my dad would get violent sometimes. And I just took a few steps back and said, somebody call 911. Don't find the other diabetic in the room.
What if I get low during this? What's going to happen then?
And then, like, I don't know, later on, people tried to play matchmaker between him and I, but and friends. We did.
It's nice. All right. Well, all right. I'm done trying to help you. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us. Thank you.
Did you have any questions on anything else?
I don't think so. Like, it's more of an emotional journey for me when people tell stories like this. Like, I leave it, I think, no differently than the people listening. Like, I feel like I started with you when you were 5 and I ended here. You seem happy, which makes me happy. But I don't think that I don't know. I don't think that there is anything that you didn't answer along the way I mean, I wondered about a lot of things while we were talking, but they all came out during the conversation. I feel pretty good about it, actually.
So I currently maintain myself at about a 7 A1C.
Okay.
I feel like I do have room to improve, but not too drastically or rapidly.
Yeah, right.
I'm on the Omnipod 5 now, and it's going well for me.
Good.
So that's where I'm at.
That's excellent. Good for you. Comfortable and happy is a perfect place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you'll be in the 6s?
I think now that, I mean, it's only been a month since I've been on the Omnipod 5, but I already have such a reduction in my fear of getting low.
Good.
That I feel more comfortable being in the lower 100s, where I used to eat like a little bite of chocolate or something if I was 99 or 100.
Now you wait to see what happens.
Yeah, because I know like my pump isn't going to let me keep dropping. So I feel more comfortable, and I'm already at a time in range at about 70% time in range.
Good for you.
Where it used to be like 30, 40.
I should try to slice off about 10% of the confidence that I gave my daughter and give it to you, because there's times I'm texting her, I'm like, hey, this is not holding up. You really, like, could you eat something, please? And she's like, it'll be fine. I'm like, I don't, it's not, I'm watching it. It's not going to be fine. And she's just like the opposite of that. She's like, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. And then when it's not, she's like, oh, all right. And then she handles it. But there's moments when she's like 75 and I'm looking at trends and I'm like, Arden, this is going to be 60 in like 15 minutes. And she's like, nah, it might be all right. She's like, the algorithm's trying to fix it. I'm like, I know, I see, but I don't think that's how it's going to go. And I wish I could just take a little bit of that and I'll slide it over to you. Because it sucks to hear that somebody is still like, it has your level of understanding, but because of past situations, like you're still more comfortable around like 120 or 130, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll get there. I mean, and I think the algorithms do a really good job of mimicking that confidence that you're talking about. Like, well, at least this thing, the way I tend to think of it is, I know it's not 100% I'm not going to get low, but I know there's a thing helping me to stop from falling like a stone. And that's pretty helpful. Like, you know, like the idea that it's been taking my basal away for 45 minutes because it's predicting this low. I've seen Loop do it. I'm sure, you know, Control IQ and all of them, like they're trying to stop like a drastic low. And there's something, I don't know, there's something more comfortable about a drift to 60 than like, hey, I'm 90 and then 10 minutes later I'm 60. That's different world.
So I used to be a 2 to 3 juice box a night person before starting Omnipod 5. I was on Omnipod Aeros.
Wow.
Ever since starting Omnipod 5, I haven't had any juice boxes. I can still be in the club though, right?
Oh, for course, sure. But that's such a wonderful like improvement.
It's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic news. Oh, wow. Good for you. I mean, just the calories alone, but the unbroken sleep is a big deal. And confidence when you're sleeping, and that's all like really, really important. Oh, I'm glad for you.
And I don't feel the need to go to bed with an elevated sugar.
Good for you. That's a huge leap. And how long have you been doing it?
A month.
Oh my gosh, this is terrific. Yeah, you'll be in the 6s in like 3 months probably.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
Yeah, no, just from that, just from the thing. How long have you been listening to the podcast?
I started not too long after you started, and then I kind of forgot about it. Sorry.
Don't worry.
And I went like a few years without listening, and then I picked it back up when I started considering upgrading my pump.
Cool. Oh, that's great.
Probably about a year ago, I picked it up back up again.
Oh, good for you. Wow, you were there in 2015. You were listening.
Yeah.
Wow. Geez, I thought I was talking to myself back then. Thank you. It's terrific. The first year of the podcast had as many downloads as yesterday had, which is really bizarre to say out loud. But I really thought that like, and that first year, my wife's like, what do you think? I'm like, it's going great. I was like, I can't believe I got 25,000 people to listen to the show this year. Like, that's so cool. Mm-hmm. You know, I was all excited. And now like there are days that go by. Like if there's like I don't know, like holidays pop up and you get like a little reduction on a holiday or something like that. I'm like, where'd everybody go? My wife's like, what are you talking about? She's like 23,000 people downloaded the show yesterday. And I was like, I know, but I was really expecting 24 and a half. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I have standards. But it's very interesting to hear that somebody that was there in the beginning. That's very, very interesting for me and cool to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Of course. Oh,
the sound quality is improved.
I was going to say, at least I bought a better microphone. I had a great microphone back then. I just didn't know what I was doing. And this one's better. This microphone is so cool that if I just go a couple of steps away, it won't pick my voice up. And so in a scenario when I don't have access to a recording studio, you still get a good silence around my voice with this microphone. I wish I would have.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I wish I would have thought to do it sooner. Like the other day I was recording and a trash truck went down the street and the microphone didn't pick it up. I was like, oh, this thing's terrific. But, oh my gosh. Yeah, we're doing the best ofs now and people are really enjoying it, which is something I did it and I was like, I wonder how this is going to go over. But we're running like a best of episode once a week. And I'm getting a lot of
I've heard a couple of them come up this past week.
Yeah. And I'm getting good feedback from people. But it's the sound, like when it pops up and I hear that old microphone, I cringe. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to get lunch.
Are you thinking that this is an after dark episode or?
Good question. I had this thought about 45 minutes ago and I don't think it is.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I try to say this every time it comes up, but I don't love that the After Dark episodes are called After Dark episodes. It's not a function of something I would do. It's a function of people listening. So what I learned is that people need a warning sometimes, and that not everybody's cool hearing about like a heroin bender and stuff like that. I don't see it that way. Like I wouldn't mark any of them like that. But I don't know. I mean, you had an eating disorder, but I don't see that that's, something.
Triggering.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see this as an After Dark. Do you think so? What did you think?
I didn't think so either, but I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, I wondered about it, like I said, about 45 minutes ago, and I didn't write down anything or have any thoughts that would make me think that way. So, no, I don't think so.
All right.
Cool.
Great.
Excellent. Hold on one second for me, okay?
Sure.
I'd like to thank my anonymous guest for coming on the show today and sharing her story. If you'd like to wear the same insulin pump that Arden does, all you have to do is go to omnipod.com/juicebox. That's it. Head over now and get started today, and you'll be wearing the same tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing since she was 4 years old. A huge thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Don't forget, usmed.com/juicebox. This is where we get our diabetes supplies from. You can as well. Use the link or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or call the number, get your free benefits check so that you can start getting your diabetes supplies the way we do from US Med. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.